All right. Hey, good afternoon, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Friday, June 28th, 2024. This is your afternoon tropical update. We have newly formed Tropical Depression 2 on our plate this afternoon. National Hurricane Center upgraded Invest 95L at 5 p.m., located right here in the central tropical Atlantic, about 1,200 miles to the east of the Windward Islands. This will soon be Tropical Storm Beryl. It will generally move off to the west-northwest, could become a hurricane over the next couple days, should strike the Windward Islands as a hurricane on Monday, and then we have a lot of uncertainty about the future as this moves into the Caribbean. For whatever it's worth, we're also tracking another pair of interests in the Atlantic this afternoon. We have Invest 94L still kind of chugging along here. It managed to just miss Central America. This is going to slowly lumber over the Yucatan Peninsula tomorrow. It'll be in the southwest Gulf of Mexico on Sunday and early Monday before moving into Mexico, similar to Alberto and Alberto's less successful friend from last week. Once again, like those two storms, there will not be a whole lot of direct U.S. impacts. The system, similar to that, is supposed to move into northern Mexico. And again, besides maybe some rain and clouds for South Texas, not expecting a whole lot out of 94L. And then there is another wave following what is Tropical Depression 2. But that one's pretty far out there, and we got a lot of time to track it. So this video today is basically just going to be on Tropical Depression 2. So let's go ahead and look at the National Hurricane Center's map. You can see 2 down there under the other systems highlight, and then 94L over here. But let's go ahead and take a look at TD2. So this is the satellite presentation here this afternoon. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. We've already talked about it a lot on the page, but Hurricane Center did upgrade this at 5 p.m. I wholeheartedly agree. I think that this was perfectly on time. We have a system producing more robust thunderstorms. We have a much bigger cirrus canopy this afternoon. Those thicker cirrus clouds are more of a shield now instead of just sporadic here and there, indicating that those thunderstorms are producing stronger and higher cloud tops. We also have some curved bands moving into the system, and up under all those cirrus clouds is a robust low-level circulation center. We kind of saw it developing yesterday, and it's drilled down a little bit today, and we have thunderstorms anchored to that. Those are all our check marks, and voila, we have a tropical depression on our hands. Satellite presentation on IR, also confirming that bursts of deep pink and magenta cloud tops there at the end of the satellite, indicating those cloud tops getting into the 80 to 90 below zero range Celsius, which is very tall, very deep thunderstorm activity. And it's no doubt that TD2 is well on its way to intensifying, and I would not be shocked if this was Beryl by tonight or early tomorrow. This is the first forecast from the National Hurricane Center as of 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Maximum sustained winds 35 miles an hour, and the movements to the west at 21 miles an hour. That westward motion will continue. It'll become a little bit more just north of due west over the next couple of days. And as we see on the map, we have this thing becoming a hurricane as early as Sunday afternoon, that H stamp right there on the cone. And then by Monday, the Hurricane Center forecasts this to be making landfall in the southern Windward Islands near Trinidad, Tobago, the Grenadines, St. Vincent, Grenada. There's a couple of others down there. I don't know them all by heart, but those are the storms, rather the islands that are going to be impacted by the storm over the next couple of days. And again, Monday is the potential landfall there, so you'll have tropical storm and hurricane watches and warnings over the weekend, and preparations probably need to be done by Sunday night because this is going to be coming in pretty fast, and it will be gone by Monday evening. But a significant strike is possible. The Hurricane Center's forecast over the next 4 days, indicating that this thing could be a top-end Category 2 hurricane by Monday afternoon, and this is kind of the window where this will be making landfall on those islands. Hurricane Center has up to 105 miles an hour. Very aggressive forecast out of the gate. I would imagine probably in the 90th percentile or higher for the intensity guidance, especially on the first run. The Hurricane Center has made a much more, I guess they've become more aggressive with their forecasts out of the gate as rapid intensification and quick intensification periods have become more forecastable. They have really tried to up their game in that department. So Hurricane Center is being aggressive out of the gate, and this could potentially be near Category 3 intensity by that 4-day window. So after that, we do move this into the Caribbean Sea. We can see this on Tuesday and Wednesday. They have this as a hurricane moving south of Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, and then near Jamaica by Wednesday or July 3rd, the day before, Independence Day. And then from there, there are some questions. But let's go ahead and look at the models and the guidance first, and then we'll come back to that. So we'll go over to Tomer Berg's page. He's a PhD student at Oklahoma, runs his own tropical weather page, and he produces these really good ensemble graphs. And I want to look at these because this is called a super ensemble. This is the European model, the GFS model, the UK Met, and the Canadian model are 4 big global weather models, all kind of put together, making their best guesses. When we're looking at long range, where does this go down the road? We want to make as many guesses as we can, change the variables as much as we can to see what the range of outcomes are. And you can see here the ensemble guidance generally has a range of outcomes somewhere from Cuba to Central America. This means that all we can really rule out now is that this probably isn't getting plucked out of the Caribbean. It's probably not going to turn very early and wind up moving into the Bahamas or Florida or the Carolinas. Just doesn't look likely right now. I mean, I wouldn't completely quit watching, but if I was on the east coast of Florida or Georgia or the Carolinas, I think y'all are going to probably be okay on this one. However, the Gulf Coast and, of course, Central America, Cuba, Jamaica, Yucatan, etc., all need to keep watching, especially Mexico and Central America. But the U.S. Gulf Coast needs to keep a close eye on this because potentially down the road, any storm that gets in this little region, you are going to be watching pretty carefully. If you're in Mississippi or Louisiana, Texas, even the Western Florida Panhandle, all have, some potential impacts down the road. So we're also going to look at, over on Tropical Tidbits, the intensity guidance, which does uniformly bring this up into Category 1 status for most of the main models. A few outliers are keeping this weak, but generally the more reliable models, like your ships, for example, is bringing this up. And for whatever it's worth, the Hurricane Center, which isn't plotted on here yet because this was the run before the system was upgraded, isn't shown yet, but once we have the Hurricane Center's plot, it'll kind of follow the ship's model pretty close, and it brings it up near Cat 2, Cat 3, and then kind of dips back down to Cat 1 by the end of the forecast period. So that's where the Hurricane Center is at. So basically the bottom line here is that we are going to have a system developing, and there is fairly high confidence that 1, Beryl is going to become a hurricane before it makes landfall to Windward Islands, and 2, that it's going to move through the southern Windward Islands. After that, their question marks begin to arise as we get into the early part of next week. If we want to look at the computer models, we can get a few guesses. Well, if we start with the GFS, this has this making landfall, again, Monday morning, is just offshore of the southern Windward Islands at 968 millibars. Very strong. GFS is really going after it on this one, showing the potential for a very strong Category 2, maybe even a Category 3 hurricane. Now, from there, a curious thing happens. Now, we've talked about this on the page a little bit. The elephant in the room here is climatology. Okay, we know that this is a very rare thing to have a storm this far out here in June. In fact, if Beryl becomes a hurricane as forecast, it will be the furthest east hurricane in the month of June, south of basically what we call the actual tropics ever observed. Maybe 1933 had one further, but we weren't sure that far back then. So this is pretty rare air. Now, this part of the Caribbean, especially the eastern and central Caribbean, is often referred to as the Caribbean graveyard. This is what happens this time of year is storms get in here. They have very strong easterly background winds. They have dry air, and they have shear to contend with, and they wind up getting ripped apart. And a lot of storms come here, and then they just die. Well, watch what the GFS does with old Beryl. 968, 974, 978, 981, 983. That number going down, that's stamped above the low pressure, that is the central pressure of the storm, and a rapidly rising central pressure indicates the storm is weakening on this model. Now, if you look at an average sounding near the storm, this is why, because there is a significant amount of easterly wind shear. Now, that didn't catch it very well. Let's see if we can catch the back end of it. It's kind of, yeah, it's a little bit difficult to get the whole average sounding, but the background wind shear is going to be pretty prevalent out of the northeast, and it's going to be pretty strong at that. It's going to be dealing with a lot of background winds that aren't associated with the storm directly, but these are winds, especially below 500 millibars, that are going to cause this system a lot of grief, and this is not uncommon for this time of year, but this wind shear will be a significant problem for Beryl as it does continue its trek through the Caribbean Sea. It'll have plenty of warm water and whatnot, but we are expecting conditions to become less favorable as we get into this part of the basin. So this is kind of when we see the storm weaken on the GFS, it just outright kills it. It pulls it into Hispaniola and just straight up kills it by July 4th. Now, I don't think Beryl is going to be gone by July 4th. And interesting enough, the GFS actually brings the wave behind Beryl up and also makes it a hurricane, but we're not even going to worry about that right now. But GFS just kills it. Now, the European doesn't quite kill it. The European brings it through much weaker. So the Euro is probably initializing way too low, but then it kind of steadily moves this along and just kind of moves into the Yucatan. So you can see that's kind of another possible and possibly a little bit more likely scenario. The general steering pattern is going to be this 500 millibar ridge. So we look at the quick steering flow here as we go into early next week. So this is valid Tuesday morning. If we look at our upper level pattern, forecast models seem to show a strong upper level ridge over the southeast U.S. and then the Bermuda Azores high strung out over here. So you got a high here, you got a high here, you got a little trough between them, and then you have a bit of a weakness right here. Now, it's not a big weakness, but it's just enough for the storm to gain some latitude and move a little bit closer to Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, that kind of area. It's not going to be just absolutely shoved straight south. It'll gain some latitude, and we can see that on the Hurricane Center's track. Notice how it kind of picks up some steam here as it comes through the Windward Islands, but then it kind of bends back as we go into Wednesday. If we go back to our upper level map, as we go into Wednesday and Thursday, that high begins to bridge, and you see higher heights begin to build in as this little trough lifts out. And then what likely will happen is that Beryl will be kind of forced back to the west longer. From there, it just becomes a question of, well, what's going on at this point? You know, this model clearly shows a sprawling high pressure across the southeast. If that were the case, Beryl will likely just move into the Yucatan. And then, you know, once it hits the Yucatan, the chances of any big U.S. impacts are pretty low. However, if, say, there's a stronger trough signal than we currently see, maybe all this cold air up here is further south by that point, and this ridge is broke down more, you know, if Beryl can find a window to begin to turn and can miss the Yucatan, then you're talking about potential significant impacts to the Gulf Coast, or at least some impacts. So wouldn't be completely sold on that, but I would be watching very carefully if I was on the Gulf Coast. If I'm in Florida, eastern Florida, you know, the Carolinas, Georgia, I'm not saying just don't care at all, but unlikely you guys are going to have any threat of a direct impact. But if I'm on the Gulf Coast, western Florida, Texas, that kind of thing, you know, I'm going to keep watching this one. I think if we look at the consensus is that this might be more of an issue for the Yucatan or Central America. Again, climatology tells us these things like to move a little bit lower and go a little bit more south this time of year with the stronger ridges and move more into Central America and whatnot, but we can't completely rely on that. So bottom line with Beryl is that it is going to quickly intensify. It's going to become a hurricane this weekend. It's going to hit the Windward Islands as potentially a fairly significant hurricane of maybe category 2 or so strength. And then from there, it's probably going to begin to weaken a little bit into the Caribbean, but could continue as a hurricane into July 4th. And then any potential U.S. impacts would be towards the end of that July 4th weekend. So more than a week, say, from today. So that's what I got for you guys this afternoon. We are going to have continuous updates on the page, and then I will have another YouTube video probably by Sunday. Got a lot going on this weekend. I'm switching to a midnight shift at work, so I'm going to have a lot on my plate, but I will do my best to do regular video updates. And then, of course, as this becomes a threat or doesn't become a threat to the U.S., we will have all those updates every step of the way. So that's what I got for you guys this afternoon. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.